Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another tackle room conversation of advanced bass fishing, and really appreciate you guys joining us for today's video. Guys, today we're going to be talking about the best places in a lake to fish for really big bass in the pre-spawn. In other words, where the biggest bass live during early spring. Now, this is the best time of year to catch a big one. It's like out of every bass that I've ever caught in my life over 7 pounds, I bet probably 80% of them have come between like February and early April during the pre-spawn period. This is the time of year where there's more big ones up shallow biting than any other part of the year, any other time of the year. And they live in specific areas. So today we're going to talk about the type of areas you need to look for to really catch those big ones when that water temperature starts to get up in the 50s there. Also, guys, quick reminder, just want to let you know about the really big spring fishing sale that's going on at Tackle Warehouse right now. If you guys are wanting to get stocked up on your fishing tackle or trolling motors or anything you need, I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. If you guys can use that link, it's a really good way to support the channel. And also, I'd like to invite everybody to please hit that subscribe button here to Advanced Bass Fishing. Much appreciated for that. Okay, we've been talking a lot on the channel here about early spring fishing because, man, this is everybody's favorite time, man. It's the springtime of the year is usually when people love to bass fish, and that's the best time of year to catch big fish for sure. Anytime the water temperature is in the 50s, I don't care if it's 50 or 59 degrees, the bigger bass get really aggressive when the water's in the 50s. It doesn't matter if it's in the springtime of the year or the fall time of the year. That's probably my favorite water temperature to fish under. It just seems like there's more quality fish biting under those situations than any other time. Now, one of the things about catching big bass consistently is, like, if you're going to catch big ones consistently, you have to put yourself around where those big fish live with the techniques that a big fish will actually, respond to. So I want to sort of talk a little bit about the type of areas you need to look for and the type of lures that you want to fish here. Now, we're not talking about the offshore live scoping deal. We're talking about, traditional bass fishing structures here in the video. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is a little bit about big bass. Now, big bass, in my opinion, is any fish over 4 or 5 pounds. A 4 or 5 pound bass or bigger is a rare fish. It's a quality fish. It's really survived a incredible amount of odds against it to get to that size. So they're not stupid, and they do some stuff that are pretty predictable in terms of where a bigger fish wants to live in the pre-spawn. Number one thing, well, actually there's two things, but the number one thing is you got to have some type of proximity to deeper water. And I don't mean like really close to it, but a big fish in the springtime of the year, they want to be able to move up and down structures, vertical, sideways. They like to be closer to deep water, and they need some type of cover. Now, that cover doesn't have to be like thick, complex cover, but it needs to be something conducive to them being up in that depth in that water column zone. So, some of my favorite structures to fish in the early spring are rocky banks and bluff banks. Rocky banks and bluff banks are really good areas. Lay down trees can be really good, depending on how they're positioned. Sometimes boat docks can be okay. That's usually a little bit better when the water temperature gets close to 60. And then if you have a lake that has submergent grass, that's an ideal structure. But for me, the key structures, in my opinion, is rock, some type of rock. And how the fish use that rock, a lot of it depends on the water clarity and the other structures, because you can have fish that use rocky banks or, rocky points or whatever, completely different if you have 5 foot of clarity versus a foot of clarity. So that's all relative to the lake that you're fishing. But regardless, those type of rocky banks and bluffy type banks and steeper big rock banks are usually associated with some type of a creek channel or river channel close by that drops off into the deeper water. That is a prime structure. And another thing, try to think in terms is, if you're a bass, what you're wanting to get out of the pre-spawn. Now, if you're a bass, you do basically two things. You want to eat and you want to reproduce. So the first thing that they're doing, those big fish want to get up there shallower and start feeding up in preparation for the spawn, the rigors of the spawn. It takes a lot out of them. It takes a lot out of a male bass and a female bass. So they're going to be up in those areas where they can get a lot of food. Now, the best cover for that in the springtime is probably some type of rocky bank, rocky gravel, bluff, that type of deal. They feed up on crawdads there. There's a lot of, gizzard and threadfin shad feeding on plankton. That's just the type of areas that they want to be in. Now, those areas also have to be, fairly close or adjacent to some type of a closer spawning area, because those fish, when they move up this time of year and that the water's in the 50s, they're what is called staging. They're staging, and they're living in certain areas, waiting for the conditions to get right to move shallow to spawn. So the best areas for a big bass, in my opinion, in most lakes, is some type of steeper rocky bank that may or may not have some type of cover on it, that is fairly close to some type of flat protected water where those fish are going to spawn. That is the perfect scenario. It doesn't always have to be like that, but that's really good scenario with that. Another really good place to look for fish during the pre-spawn, if you happen to have a lake that has submerged timber in it, is a lot of those big ones during the pre-spawn like to suspend in that submerged timber close to the type of areas that I'm talking about. So like here, for example, at Table Rock Lake, you can get on some steep rocky banks like I talked about, and there'll be timber out away from the bank, maybe 10, 20, 30 foot away from the bank, that's busted off anywhere between, say, 5 to 20 foot underneath the water. And bass like to suspend in the top of those. So if you have a lake that has submerged or standing timber, those big fish really like to suspend in that timber close to that deeper water that time of year. So don't discount that. Now, if you have a lake that has some grass in it, submergent grass is probably my favorite way to catch pre-spawn big fish. Now, the best scenario for me in that is to have a lake that has either submerged hydrilla or milfoil on some type of a big flat that is in 4 to 10 foot of water close to deep water. So a lot of times the grass, depending upon the water clarity, is going to grow down into 8 foot of water. So that's pretty deep for it. But bass during the pre-spawn, if you have a lake that has grass in it, they will use a little bit shallower water than a rocky lake. The grass just provides that cover for them. So one of my favorite things to do in that situation is to get out on the big grass flats. I don't care if they're in a creek arm or a main lake, and try to get close to the edge where that grass drops off into deeper water, and key on that submergent grass, and again, in 4 to 8, maybe 10 foot of water is a really good way to catch them. So that's two good ways based upon if you have a typical man-made lake with rock and a lake that has grass in it. Now, some of the best techniques to catch big ones, there's about half a dozen techniques that really consistently produce big ones in the pre-spawn. My favorite, we've talked about this before, is a big spinnerbait. Even though a spinnerbait is an old school lure, it still, guys, is the number one big fish lure, in my opinion, when those fish are in less than 10 foot of water. A big 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce spinnerbait with the number 7 or number 8 willow leaf or Colorado, slow rolled in those structures, great way to catch big ones. Another lure you can't pass up that time of year is a full-size jig, like a brown and orange jig with a large trailer on it. Can be really, really good. A larger jerkbait, something like that Megabass Edo Shiner or Megabass Kanata fished in those areas. A jerkbait that is at least 5 inches long can be a really good player. And then also, if that water temperature is in the mid-50s, a larger swim bait like that Megabass 6 or 8 inch mag draft fish in those type of areas could be really productive too. So that's pretty straightforward, the type of lures and the type of areas. Now, in correlation with that, you also have to be out there on the right type of day. Now, if you're going to catch a big one, here's the perfect scenario. Water temperature, between 50 to 60 degrees, some type of an overcast, preferably a heavy overcast day, normal or above normal water or air temperatures, and some type of a moderate south wind, like a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind. If you get an overcast day or maybe even a rainy day that's got a south wind, temperatures are normal or above normal, and those conditions, guys, they will make those big ones bite, especially that spinnerbait. So really try to pick the day if you're wanting to catch a big one like that. If I look back at all the big ones I've caught, so many of them, guys, have come on those cloudy, warm spring days when you got some wind or a front coming in or maybe even light rain. That is just ideal situation, especially if you have water visibilities over about 3 feet or so. It can be really, really good. So anyway, guys, that's just a few off the wall tips. We could go into this a long time, but that'll get you started maybe to catch some good ones this spring. So give them a try and hope it helps out. See you.